Smartphone clones are really fun to look at, and there's a clone for pretty much every device out there these days. We found a Galaxy S7 clone for around $75 on DHgate, and we wanted to see just how similar it is to its real counterpart. Hey everyone, I am Harris Craycraft with XDA TV, and today we're comparing a real S7 with a fake one. So starting off with the packaging, you wouldn't be able to tell them apart from first glance, or necessarily any glance unless you knew exactly what you were looking for. There's a slight difference in the background of the capacity marking. On the bottom, the clone is missing the large white sticker with all the phone's identification info, and on the back there is significantly less information than on the real phone, followed by the lack of a carrier logo on the top of the box. So taking off the real S7 sleeves reveals a whole new set of differences. Once we're looking at the naked boxes, there's quite a bit more differences. Opening up the box of identical dimensions, we see the clone sitting up top in a plastic sleeve, the first sign of it being fake. Underneath, we have a slightly different plastic housing that's a little bit cheaper and thinner, followed by the documentation, which is significantly thinner. Then a screen protector also exists, which is not included with the real S7, followed by the accessories, which are kind of similar. The power brick, although it feels hollow, does in fact charge, to my surprise, but lacks the adaptive wireless charging text on it, and has a lower voltage input than the real charger. And finally, the clone lacks a USB on-the-go adapter, plus the cables are a different color than the real devices. Alright, so a quick tour of the device. Right off the bat, it feels much lighter, and it's clearly made out of plastic, and more plastic. Anybody who knows anything about the S7 would realize this is a fake right when picking it up. The home button has a false silver ring around it. The display area of the device is much more gray and fake looking than the real S7. The camera module protrudes a bit more and doesn't look as premium, and the FCC info on the back as well as the Galaxy branding is a bit off, pretty noticeable. The buttons, ports, and speakers are all there and accurate, however. The heart rate scanner on the back is not functional. The flash is much weaker on the fake. The home button does work, although the fingerprint scanner does not, to no surprise. And there's no water resistance with this, probably because the back cover comes off with the bend of the phone, which I accidentally discovered. So booting this up, you can see it looks pretty legit. Obviously the animations are pretty slow because this is running on a very, very slow processor. But it looks just like real TouchWiz. So we get what looks like an identical skin laying on top of Android 6.0.1, which is on par with the real S7. A few elements point to it clearly being an older gen version of TouchWiz, however, such as the quick setting menu, which you scroll through instead of being able to expand. Double tapping the home button does not launch the camera. There's no multitasking or split screen like on the real S7, and services such as the phone dialer just open the Google equivalent, in this case the Hangouts dialer application, which is slightly different than what you get on the real S7. And in terms of things like Antutu benchmarks, it just never got past 5%. Outside of that though, the software is pretty in sync with the real S7, although obviously much more sluggish. In terms of specs, the fake is rocking a dual-core 1.3 GHz processor, a 5-inch stunning 960 by 540 resolution screen, a gig of RAM, 4 gigs of storage, and a beautiful 5-megapixel rear camera paired with a 2-megapixel front camera. Just look at this resolution. This is compared to the S7's quad-core 2.2 GHz Snapdragon 820, 5.1-inch 2560 by 1440 resolution screen, 4 gigs of RAM, 32 or 64 gigs of internal storage, and 12 and 9 megapixel front and rear cameras respectively, although the clone does try very hard to convince me that it has the same specs as the real S7. It does have Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and cellular capabilities if you were to insert your SIM card, but you'll obviously be able to tell that this isn't the real one if you were to use the phone. So from the outside, you could totally be fooled that this was a real S7. Make sure you look out for the small things, such as the details on the back of the box, the inclusion of a sleeve around the box, and then the accessories on the inside. But as soon as you pick it up, if it feels like a toy phone from Dollar General rather than a high-end $650 phone, you know you've been done wrong. But it's very cool to see how superficially similar this device is to the real S7. Alright, so that's it for this video. Hopefully it helped out if you want to know the differences. This was Harris. You can check me out on my main channel at youtube.com/harriscraycraft, and my social media is on the screen. I'll catch you guys in the next one, maybe tearing down these phones. Who knows? Thanks for watching.